Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by Tech Systems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to techsystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Today we're going to talk about startups and the importance of ensuring your teams are able to maintain agility throughout your development and growth. This means knowing how to configure your teams with both internal and external resources, and even when to build things internally versus externally. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Dan Moore, CEO and co-founder of Vaporware. Dan co-founded Vaporware to help entrepreneurs take their software ideas to market. Over the past 6 years, he's helped Vaporware deliver thousands of iterations across dozens of apps in 4 main industries: healthcare, HR, real estate, and IT, ranging from the first MVP versions to modern iterations on mature solutions. With a strong belief that anyone can become the next big software as a service company, he leads Vaporware in helping business founders pivot their business through process automation, technical modernization, and software innovation. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about what your background and what Vaporware does?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So I've been around computers forever. I was a programmer since the age of 8, I think.
Wow.
Thanks to my mom, she kind of immersed me through her degree and career path in programming and computer science. So I ended up going to Georgia Tech. I graduated through their computer science program and joined Cisco Systems, working on data center and networking products for them. So through that work at a different company, I ended up falling into what's called product management. And while I was there, I ended up co-founding Vaporware with 3 other guys to launch some of our own product ideas. So we were focused on data center work in kind of the high tech space at the time, but we kind of quickly realized that we were just really insulated and found other people that had better insights and ideas to different market needs and problems that were out there. And so we pivoted Vaporware to find a model to try and help those people. And most of the time it was they had problems doing it themselves and had failed a couple times, or they had never done it before and had no idea what to do. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Great. Well, yeah, let's explore that a little bit more in that role that you play with your customers. So, when is the right time to hire an external team? You talked about people that have ideas. When's the right time to hire them, and how can business owners and leaders know when to make that call?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a couple of natural times that we've seen relationships go really well. The first one is when a company, and these are traditionally like services companies or providing some kind of manual labor and solution to business problems. They've never built their own software before. So they want to get started on the right foot, and they need an external partner or someone in general to come and lead them. And so it's kind of like a Sherpa helping you climb a mountain if you've never done it before. They've been through the process. They know exactly like where all the false steps are and can provide that expert guidance.
Great.
Another side of it is with those same kind of companies, experts and CTOs and those kind of people aren't really interested in joining the company yet. Either they're too expensive or there's not enough focus in the company on technology yet. And so there's a lot of risk to joining that company full time. And all of that really comes from when you're building custom software for the first time, you're really testing out new markets or new business strategies. And from a business perspective, you might not want to completely commit to that line of business yet. And so that's very different in the startup companies that we help. And they have a completely different reason of coming to us. Usually it's like fast deadlines or new sales or market opportunities that their main development and product teams can't handle. And so we fill a couple of roles there as well.
Well, what should those entrepreneurs then look for in an external team? I like that you defined the challenges, but what should they be looking for in a team to solve those challenges?
Yeah, I think the first piece of that is around business alignment. So a lot of development teams that are out there are incentivized to just continue working and building more code and architecting grand systems. And the problem with that is that isn't necessarily aligned to your business. That's a very technical approach. So making sure that whatever they're working on and however they're working is really aligned and centered around the business objectives that you hope to accomplish with them is huge.
Yeah.
Besides that, there's probably like a whole bunch of other things about speed, how fast that they can get stuff done. What is their focus? Is it a large team of people that are helping you part time, or is it a small team helping you full time? What is their capability to understand and like know your industry really well and all that kind of stuff?
So, what about hybrid models? This is something that not only do I currently have my current position at Career Gig, but also I've done this in the past. But a hybrid model, I would define that as, there's an external team augmenting an internal one. What's the
Mm-hmm.
best way to make something like that work?
I I think what we've seen is a division of responsibilities, and that kind of stems from this concept where you want one person to be responsible and to have the vision all underneath that one person, and in like a movie, that's a director kind of thing, and
Right.
so
Right.
being able to carve out a small piece of that and really make sure that um, those people exist at all different levels of that movie is incredibly important. So, um,
Yeah.
like if it's a larger product or a platform or what we call an ecosystem, carving out a product works or a feature set. So one thing we've done is built new interfaces or new channels of communication into existing products. And so we're actually like submitting pull requests and design reviews with the core product team, but they're able to come in and kind of review and make sure that we follow their best practices and coding guidelines and all that good kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that helps. I would say like the one other thing in the startup world that we see all the time is initial innovation as well. So um, a lot of internal product teams really like to do this kind of work, but it's very difficult to get rid of the mindset that is all the constraints of your current business. And
Mm.
so what we can do is kind of come in as like a Navy SEALs team and like
Okay.
take a foothold in an innovation space and really run some quick proof of concepts and get some user feedback around that initial innovation idea. And then we could take what we learn, and it's super risky and it may all have to be thrown away and forgotten about, which is pretty common. But we usually bring those learnings back to the main organization and let them run with all the other constraints that the business has from there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way. It's like a quick learning model, because I do think that's a challenge, and especially established companies is everyone, whether it's tech teams or marketing, business, you name it, everyone kind of has their scripts that they've been running for months or years and stuff. And so for you to be able to come in, as you said, and execute something quickly, and whether or not it ends up being the end all be all, like at least people can see it quickly as opposed to spending months and years planning and pushing over other competing priorities. That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on the money with competing priorities. Is that you don't want to take off some of your most expensive assets and resources and amazing people that are knee deep in some pretty uh, hard product and technical challenges, and just put them on something when you just have a couple of questions that you really need to learn before you invest, especially in larger enterprises, millions of dollars into these new business ventures.
So how does your company Vaporware enable companies to get to market most effectively? So you brought up the idea of doing almost a test or and even if it's an internal MVP, but what about going to market, and
Mhm.
whether that's for a startup or a small company, what role do you play, and what's a good client for you to do that with?
Great question. So on the first side of that, the role that we play is um, using this custom methodology to really take over that entire innovation and idea and see it through to market. So it has a huge focus on getting to real users and getting their actual feedback on the system or product, as well as the other pillar is time boxing that effort.
Mm.
So we use this process of making bets is effectively how we look at investments, and saying that, hey, it's a bet. We don't know all the answers to everything, but we want to hedge our bets a little bit and make sure that that's a specific dollar amount and time amount, which is very important in product development. And how that breaks down is it starts with what we call a design sprint, which takes all the initial solution ideation into a 1 week time frame. It was pioneered by Google Ventures, and we've modified it a little bit because the second half of that we've stretched out into getting better feedback or more feedback by prototyping that solution and really taking that into sales demos and um, user testing scenarios, depending on the kind of product that it is. So that's time boxed in the 2 weeks as well. So, and then
Mm.
after that is when we actually put code down on paper. But there's a lot that we could do before we get to that point. So,
Well, along these lines, and just to take this a step further about, let's call it cultural or organizational type things. So, you've worked with a lot of teams bringing these ideas to market. What are
mhm.
the traits and behaviors, process and programming language and all that stuff aside? What are the traits and the behaviors that characterize successful startup teams?
Mm, that's that's the $1 million question, I think.
Right?
Um, uh, some of the things that we've seen have been um, common, and it's out there, but I think it's really a mix of a lot of different things. One that a lot of people miss when starting a startup is they try and find people that are from the same exact background as themselves. It's easier to communicate. You can kind of get to a further destination faster. But the problem with startups is that they're not necessarily um, a set solution. They don't have a product yet. They are focused on the problem, and they should be focused on the problem of what are they trying to solve, who are the customers that they're serving. And there's a great book called Range by David Epstein, and it talks a lot about the diversity of people, and not in terms of like skin color, but that does help. But more in terms of backgrounds or perspectives or ways of thinking, and it outlines this really good model of what we call T-shaped people, where people at our company and what we look for and who we hire are these people that can understand all of these different perspectives and don't hold any as like the one true fact. Um, and so it's this range or diversity of these people that I think makes them really incredible at solving some hard challenges that startups have.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I mean, that's great, and I mean, I think I'm obviously a huge fan of diversity of all kinds and teams, and I think that's a great argument for that. Is you kind of get this in a startup, you get this echo chamber of a lot of people that on the one hand, it's cool because everybody's excited about launching a product and an idea and everything like that, but you get a lot of people that think the same way grew up the same way, worked for the same companies or whatever it may be. And so, yes, of course, they're going to kind of see things a certain way. I mean, I know having recently launched a product with Career Gig, it's amazing how how many times we went through a process, and we do put a priority on diversity. But even that aside, like, talking with 3 different customers in the first week after launch, it's amazing what they uncover that, man, I never thought of that in a million years. Like our, we've had customers actually help us create new products within the first week after launch, simply because they just came from a completely different viewpoint. So
Mm-hmm.
that resonates very, very personally with me right now. And I think that's so it's just so important. And again, I think it's a great argument for greater diversity of all kinds. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. I think like the counter side of that is holding opinions and kind of knowing what your core product is about. And I think
Yeah.
someone inside of the company, and usually the CEO type person who's out there marketing and in a startup at least is out there selling the product very, very often, needs to still stand for something so people can understand it quickly. But those opinions should be held very, very loosely by that person, and the rest of the team, if it's a diverse team, can challenge it and bring all these different perspectives in. So it's this really fine balance, but you're absolutely right, and that's something we see all the time.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. So, behaviors, it's like you need to adapt and change, right? So, you need to instill those behaviors in a team, and yet you can't completely lose what your, I guess if you lose what your mission is, you're not really the same company. And there's examples of companies that have completely changed and still been successful, but those are few and far between. So how do you, you characterize the what needs to happen, but how do you kind of instill that, or what advice do you give to customers that maybe are pivoting a little too much, and maybe should focus a little bit more?
Yeah, I love the term that you use, mission. It's very well aligned and something that we, even as our own company, we look at on a yearly basis. But it is not something that should be looked on at a daily basis. And so, where we help startups align with that is we help them be passionate about the problem that they're trying to solve and not the solution. So,
Yeah,
even if you created like the greatest new blockchain, machine learning, all these buzzword technologies, if that doesn't solve the core problem, then that's not really your mission. It's not aligned to what your company stands for, and as Simon Sinek says, the why behind it. So,
yeah,
um, really, like knowing that you can pivot on that solution all day long instead of holding on to something that like the market's not buying. But if the market's telling you that they don't want to buy this, then pivot away from it.
yeah,
But that problem is still there most likely, and like there's a reason why that solution was such a good idea in the first place. So
yeah, yeah.
focusing in on that, I think, is how you adapt.
So as far as an MVP, one of the challenges is over engineering. And, I've read Lean Startup and, read tons of books on different approaches to figuring out this MVP process. But, from your perspective, um, what exactly, how should someone define that minimum in the minimum viable product? And, how do you coach so that there's enough there that people can tell what's there, and yet you don't spend 3 years over engineering something that the market may not want?
Yeah, great question. I think that that's definitely a challenge that is different for every single scenario. And that's like the consultant side of me is like, well, it depends.
Right,
But
right.
the other side of me is definitely well rooted in the Eric Ries and Lean Startup and Lean UX movement, and uh, that's kind of hence the name Vaporware. Uh,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
as you know, Vaporware is software that doesn't exist yet, and um,
yeah,
that's what we had. We had ideas, but none of it existed yet, and so we all kind of tongue in cheek just said, well, no one's going to trademark Vaporware, so we might as well do it ourselves.
I love that
Um,
name, by the way. Yeah, that's and for what you do, I think it's such a great name. And yeah, for those that know, it's like it's sort of a double entendre almost.
yeah, absolutely. And it's gotten us into a little bit of trouble in our marketing and sales side, I think, a few times. People are like, no, I'm not going to buy Vaporware. That's a stupid idea.
Right,
But
right.
we're selling that same concept of we don't know what the best solution is. Like we won't come out and pretend to say yes, this is the end all be all solution. Like you should invest and put all your eggs in this one basket. And so through that MVP concept, we have a couple of rules of thumb. Like if you're proud of it, it's not minimal enough. It's like
Mm.
something that you should be absolutely embarrassed by. Now, embarrassed is different than like completely falling on your face and not showing value,
Right.
because that middle word, viable, is it still has to solve the problem. Now, maybe it's a small problem to exist with, and it's not like the total vision that you see and the direction you're headed in. And but maybe it's a PowerPoint slide deck. It's not actually real software, and you're just trying to get the concept across to somebody and make them an offer that says, "Hey, in the next 6 months, we're working on this. We've already made great progress, and this is what we think can really solve your problem. Would you be willing to invest in something like that?" And
Yeah.
uh, I think like there's markets out there, consumer markets, where you need to really focus on like lovability and delightful interfaces and all this kind of stuff. But for where we operate in the B2B software as a service space, early adopters can, like, they're dealing in spreadsheets all day and post-it notes. Like they
Right.
can look past the cruft that comes with MVPs. So
Yeah. That's
that's kind of where we start with.
Well, one last question before we wrap up. For a potential entrepreneur or even a serial entrepreneur, what is your advice for when to engage a company like yours in conversations and ideation? Like, how early in the process is it beneficial to do so?
Yesterday. So I would say as soon as possible. And by engage, I don't mean like pay us money.
Yeah,
That's not an engagement to us. So in our consulting space and how we take advantage of consulting is, we build relationships with people, and we are interested in solving problems. So just understanding and keeping an ear to a market is something that we're doing all the time anyway, and provides value to us that we can't buy. Like I can go out there and buy and survey people, but I can't understand how people think without talking to them.
yeah,
So um, having these conversations is incredibly valuable to us, learning about ideas. And it's not like we'll steal an idea. We have like no interest in that. It's more of, well, here's our experience, and here's like some other avenues that you can consider. And so we do a lot of mentorship of startups that are never going to be customers of ours, because those relationships and the world and the industry is too small. So
yeah,
um, we've even started to codify some of that and have created these what we call assessments, of market ideas and business model canvases and stuff like that, to just provide some early value to startups, so that hopefully they can be more successful. And as they're more successful, and the rising tide kind of lifts all boats, and we want to be there with them. So.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
We have a couple of sources. I'm on a couple of podcasts, but we kind of put them all under our insights page. So if you head over to vaporware.net, and just right at the top there, you'll see some insights. We offer some other stuff about just innovation and what we're reading all over the world, and kind of curate that content. So that's probably the best place to check it out.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Dan Moore, CEO and co founder of Vaporware, for joining the show. To learn more about customer and employee experience, I recommend you go to my website at gregkilstrom.com and make sure to check out my latest book, The Center of Experience. More information is available on my website or wherever the book is available, like Amazon. Thanks for listening to the Agile World with Greg Kilstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.